Hate is a problem for us all to solve.
Hate is something that is always taught. We need to teach more about love.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I would also like to welcome you to today's edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. I'm so very glad you've joined us. If this happens to be your first time here, a special welcome to you. I think you're going to enjoy what you hear and see today. Before we get started, I'd like for our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I am also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm President of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Dan Levin. I'm the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
And I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as the Senior Minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. So very glad you could join us for today's discussion. And we have a new panelist today that is joining us for the very first time. Welcome. We're glad to have you here, Rabbi Levin. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. I grew up outside Washington, D.C. in a Reformed congregation and then moved up to Colgate University, where I spent 3 wonderful years in the middle of New York State. Spent a year studying at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and then attended rabbinical school at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem, Los Angeles, and then New York City. I moved to Boca Raton, Florida in 1996 as an associate rabbi and then moved up to Livingston, New Jersey for 3 years. A wonderful little congregation there, and then back to Boca Raton to be the senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in 2004.
Well, again, welcome. We're so very glad you could join us for today's program.
It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Let's get right to our discussion, shall we? In 1994, the famous film producer Steven Spielberg founded the Shoah Foundation at the University of Southern California to collect testimony from Holocaust survivors. He has now expanded the foundation's mission and public focus to fight hate, reports the New York Times in December of 2019. 2018, I should say. Spielberg is quoted as saying, "The presence of hate has become taken for granted. We're not doing enough to counter it," close quote. And so a 10,000-foot space has been opened at USC to provide digital interactive opportunities for storytelling and conversation with 16 survivors of genocide. Through this technology, visitors can ask questions of the survivors who will respond based on specific word patterns that cover more than 2,000 questions. In addition to the Holocaust survivors, included are individuals from Rwanda, Cambodia, Armenia, and more. In talking about the expansion of this foundation and his focus on storytelling to combat hate, Spielberg noted that storytelling is, quote, fundamentally human, and by approaching his project through stories, he hopes to inspire the art of listening. Talking of hate itself, he notes the importance of recognizing that it doesn't matter where hate is focused. Hate is hate, he says. We all have a responsibility for watching over each other, standing up for one another. There's no room for being a bystander. Today, I'm asking the panelists to consider at least these 3 questions. First of all, do you think Spielberg is being too optimistic to think that storytelling can combat hate? Next question. Do you agree that hate is hate and that by all of us have a responsibility for responding to hate in any form? And then finally, is there anything in your faith community that they are doing, that you are doing specifically to try to combat hate? And those are the questions we're going to ask our panelists today. Let's go back to those who helped to begin the program. Let's go to Dr. Luxton. Dr. Luxton, can you tell us a little bit more of your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, you know, I've become increasingly distressed at what is going on in our society in North America and beyond. It seems that when it comes to hate, we just seem incapable of learning from the past. I cannot think of a time in history where hate has done anything but be destructive to society and to individuals. And yet, it's still there. We just look at what's happening in North America recently, and the amount of acts of irrational hate that is perpetuated against different groups of people. It's something that I think as faith communities we have a responsibility to respond to and say, this is just not okay. And I guess I have a little bit of a bias. My background is English literature, so storytelling to me is great. Now, I'm not saying this is the only way to combat hate, but I think that Spielberg is onto something very important here when he looks at this, because I think when you hate, it does dehumanize another group. It's based on already dehumanizing. You don't see people as of value, and therefore it's okay to be destructive, it's okay to produce hate. And storytelling by its nature is not simplistic. Hate can also in some ways be simplistic. It refuses to look at the complexity of life and individuals. And I think storytelling asks us to step back and actually look and evaluate and understand what is going on in someone's life, what makes their experience, their heritage valuable and important, and how can we respond and respect that. It also helps us understand the damaging nature of hate. So I applaud what he's doing, but I think it has to go beyond that as well. We've got to deal with this hate somehow.
All right, thank you. And then Dr. Robeck, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Some more thoughts from your opening statement, please.
Yeah, I think I came into this fairly early on, but my sense is that children learn how to hate very quickly. I mean, practically the first word they say after daddy or mommy is no. And that generally says something that they're over against immediately. I remember when one of our sons was with me in the grocery store, and we have a lot of people from all different colors and of the rainbow in our home many times. And it suddenly dawned on him for the very first time, he was 3 years old, that this man that we were talking to was black. He looked different. And then he wanted to know, well, why is he black, you see? So my job is to help him understand how God has created us all in these various colors and so forth. But it brought home to me the fact that, I saw the buses at that time that were saying racism is taught. Racism is taught. It's not only racism. And hatred of anything that is other is taught, I think. It's also nurtured. And I think that as it is nurtured by other people, it's manipulative. If it's nurtured by me, then it's very bad for my own psyche. It needs to be named, and it needs to be replaced. And the best thing I know of to replace hatred is love. And when I look at the life of Jesus, he had all kinds of reasons to hate different groups of people. He did not do that. He chose to show them love, whether they deserved that love or not. I'm an example.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome back to the program, Dr. Matthews. Glad to have you here. Your thoughts on the subject, please.
I agree. I think Steven Spielberg is just on to something. I don't think he is too optimistic at all. And storytelling is a very powerful tool. In the vein of missions, storytelling, those of us who are in the U.S. and when we travel to certain countries, they train us on the art of storytelling because many of these cultures learn orally, how they speak, and then orally, what they hear. And so I think this is a powerful thing. This is interesting because just a few weeks ago, I was contacted by the National Institute for Civil Discourse. I believe they're out of D.C., and they wanted to use our congregation to have political discussions. They want to pair people up who disagree so that we can bring some type of civility and learning how to listen and strengthening the art of listening. So I think we got to combat it with love, and I'll say more about that later on.
All right, thank you very much. And then Rabbi Levin, again, glad to have you here today. What are your thoughts on today's subject, please?
Well, I think it's very, very timely that we are addressing this when you consider the attacks not just in North America, but around the world that are about religious hatred or prejudice or chauvinism for one particular kind over another. There's a discussion in the Talmud that talks about what prompted the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, and the rabbis had plenty of things they could have chosen, but what they said, what really amounted for the cause of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, what destroyed holiness was, in Hebrew we call it sinat chinam, or senseless hatred. And ultimately, if you look at what amounts for holiness in the book of Leviticus, it's all about love. It's about the commandment that we are given to love each other as ourselves. But there's another passage in the same chapter that says it's not enough just to love people who are, in Hebrew, kamocha, who are like you, where you say, love your neighbor as yourself, love the one who is like you. We are then later commanded that you have to love the person who is the stranger. You have to love the people who are not like you. And the way that we learn to love is by understanding the core humanity that lies inside each of us. And storytelling narrative is the way that we peel away those outer extraneous layers of a personhood and get to the real core of their humanity and their divinity.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go down table now. Reverend Plumley, glad to have you here today. Your thoughts on the subject?
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation so far. I would say, Andrea, that hate is used and is promoted at certain times when we're wanting to put ourselves on a war footing. Hate is something that is taught. It's encouraged because hate leads to dehumanization,
right?
As I believe you inferred somewhere along the line, and that is a necessary component of being able to go kill somebody. And so if somebody's preparing you to be ready to kill, they have to teach you how to dehumanize that person. And storytelling defeats dehumanization. If I'm allowed to tell my story, then I can introduce you to the complexity of me. And that helps get away from what hate does. It's very simplistic, and it insists that there's only one part of me, and that's the part that you don't like, and that I'm not a complex person that has both good and bad things about me.
Very well stated. Thank you. Then Dr. Luxton.
Yeah, I was going to just ask if you could kind of expand on that. So are you saying that's a good thing when we go to war? Is it good to dehumanize?
No.
We need to hate him so we can go to war?
I think he's describing function, right? It's just
Yes.
how it
I'm
happens.
saying that it is a function of
Right.
of warring.
Thank you. Does that clarify?
Sort of? Yes.
Let's hear from Bishop Olson, and then we'll come back. We'll get back to it again. Bishop Olson, your thoughts, please.
Oh, I think that storytelling is essential in this process, but it's also inadequate in itself because storytelling is also used to incite fears that lead to hatred. And ultimately, with narrative and the voices coming, that has to direct us to reason. Like as Isaiah says, come, let us reason together. And that involves storytelling. And then it also involves an agreement on what what do we have in common, and that we don't have to fear each other. And where fear is present, we can combat with reason, with faith, and with love.
And then Reverend Plumley, then we'll come over to Tony.
I want to commend Tony about the opportunity that you're going to have within your congregation to have people intentionally be in conversation with each other in order to break down some of the barriers that exist. Our congregation is planning something similar, trying to toward the end of this year to have an opportunity to find ways, remind people of ways to learn how to listen, ways to learn how to accept both the goodness as well as the weakness of the other person. And religious organizations, I think, at this time have a real opportunity, but a real responsibility to be doing those kinds of things.
Dr. Matthews.
Yeah, I think hate has kind of been hijacked by society and all the awful things that we see. And I think at the same time, we have to, as biblicists, we need to look at the word hate itself. When we study hate, and then we need to ask ourselves the question, should we hate, from a biblical definition of it, what God hates? I mean, he talks about things in the word that he hates, wrongdoing, idolatrous behavior. So we have to, and when we teach our people that God hates certain things, and we have to make a distinction between the hatred that we see in the world versus what God hates. That's just another...
It goes back to the battle of good and evil.
Good and evil. It's just another, way to look at this.
I agree. The challenge with that is how do you define
How do you
evil?
define it,
Yes.
right.
Dr. Robeck.
I think hatred is something that begins in the heart, and it goes back beyond the kind of actions that we take. But not only does it begin in the heart, I think it's an act of selfishness. It's a kind of an act of self-preservation in light of ignorance on the one hand and fear on the other. We don't like the other precisely. We don't understand them. Right. And as a result, we're afraid of them. And the best thing or the easiest thing to do is then to marginalize that. And hatred is a great form of marginalization.
Bishop Olson.
I would add one other benefit, I think, to the storytelling aspect of that. And that's another thing that plagues us, and that's indifference. I think in our contemporary society, we battle with indifference. And it's the indifference of so many people that allows hatred to flourish. It doesn't bother me, so I'm not going to be involved with it. I'm indifferent to it. Yeah. And I think that's another aspect that is something that's symbiotic with hatred in our society. Thank you. Rabbi Levin.
Well, I think what Tony and Bishop Olson were saying is really important. This idea that, as Elie Wiesel taught, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing you say is this idea that we have to actually have a passionate care about the things that we want to render as other. The difference is there are concepts we want to render as other and apart, but not people. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that in the history of humanity, we have done a good job of othering others, setting them apart, seeing all their differences and marginalizing. And that's what leads, I think, to the hatred of the individual. I think that our congregation also has been doing a civil discourse project because we want to bring people together to break down those barriers, to help people see the humanity that is in each other. There's a fantastic teaching in the Talmud that says, in the beginning of time, God created scores of every kind of creature, but just one human being. Mm-hmm. So why is it that God created just one human being? And that was to teach really two fundamental truths. One is that no one's lineage is any greater than anybody else. We're all descended from the same one, no matter what our difference is. And that if you destroy a single human life, it's as if you destroyed an entire world. And so I think in our day and age where we cluster ourselves with like-mindedness all the time, whether it's what we watch on TV, what we read, who we live with, the more we can break down those barriers and learn each other's narratives, learn each other's stories, learn each other's humanity, we will work much better toward eradicating the hatred we want to get rid of in our community.
All right, thank you very much. Reverend Plumley, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say that I think hatred is a first cousin to defensiveness, which is a basic survival it's a part of what allows us to survive as individuals and as a species. And it relies on the notion that I've got to get you before you can get me. And the trick of love is to help us to slow down, to get away from that notion that you might be going to get me, therefore I can address you in a different, more positive way.
Spielberg's project is about personal testimony, really, isn't it? Telling the story from a personal perspective, getting to the personhood. And you started about talking about that.
But it's also about recognizing that we are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. The first murder was prompted by one, was committed by one who refused to accept that he was the keeper of his brother.
And that's going to have to be the final statement for this segment. We are out of time for right now. We will be back in just a few moments for the summations, but there's an important announcement I'd like for you to stand by to listen to. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. I'm glad you stood by to listen to the summations, but before we do that, I too would like to encourage you to go to the website. You can email us there, you can send us regular mail, drop us a card, drop us a letter, tell us what you like about the program, tell us what you don't like about the program, and of course there's everything to like about the program, but we're looking for your opinion, and we appreciate that. And so you can tell us about future programs you'd like for us to have or subjects you'd like for us to discuss here on the Town Hall. Let's go to our summations now. Let's begin with Dr. Robeck. You're first.
Right. As I've been thinking about this, stories have an important part to play. And, the Pentecostal movement of which I am a part is very much an oral and oral tradition. We tell stories all the time, and a lot of our sermons are stories strung together, not just from Scripture, but also from real life. They have a real ability to communicate to people and communicate real truth to people. At the same time, I also have to say they can be highly manipulative. And so I think that while Steven Spielberg is really onto something here, and I want to encourage him to collect these kinds of narratives, it is also the case that you need to be watching for people who will manipulate or trip things up simply by the way they tell a particular story.
Thank you. Dr. Luxton, your summation, please.
In our setting, in a university setting, a faith-based university, we're also very involved in looking at this whole question of civil discourse and how that helps us respond to contrary positions. Because it seems that right now we're in an environment that's so polarized that is part of our problem, and that's true even within faith communities. If you think this way about a certain group, you must be a Republican. Or if you think this way about something, you must be a Democrat. And that is that takes away our responsibility, I think, to look from a biblical perspective and say, well, this is how we treat people. It is not because we're part of this party or this group or that group. There's something deeper than that relates to our whole humanity. And I think we have to get back to that and focus on that rather than allow different perspectives and views and political parties to sway us in a particular position. I think that would help us a lot.
Thank you. Dr. Levin, or Rabbi Levin.
I think in our society today there is an almost obsessive, compulsive nature of focusing on the exteriors that you see, as opposed to the intrinsic holiness that lies within. And when you look at how groups have fomented hate over time, it's all about expunging the humanity of the other. And the more that you can touch on narrative, the more that you can use the gift of storytelling, not in a manipulative way, like you can in any kind of media, but to get at the inner humanity that we all share, and you break down those boundaries and those barriers to human encounter, there, I think, is the pathway to eradicate hate.
All right, thank you. Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I'd simply like to say that learning to listen to each other's stories, learning to share our story, those are both exercises that begin the process of our walking in each other's shoes, which is the process of learning to love. And one of the things that I also like to say is that love is far more than toleration.
All right, thank you very much, Bishop Olson.
Love involves selflessness. It involves a commitment to respect and to recognize the other, both the sameness in the other and the difference in the other. Stories are necessary to break down fears and to foster a rejection of hatred, as well as to develop a commitment for love and selflessness. They also break down indifference, which allows hatred to grow and which allows violence then to fester in our society.
And thank you. And then finally, Dr. Matthews.
Yeah, I love this topic, and love is very powerful. And as the Christian community exists in society, we should do our very best to preach love, to teach it, to model it. Not sloppy agape, but modeling real love. And remember that love has to meet hate, and love will always win. In the end of the day, it wins.
All right, thank you very much. And to each of you, thank you for being here today for this important discussion. We hope this has been helpful, if not enlightening. Perhaps it'll start some discussions in your home around the kitchen table, or maybe in your church or wherever you worship. We're glad that you've tuned in today. We do look forward to meeting you from time to time through the mail, and we hope that you'll send us a line, tell us about the program, or again, as I've suggested earlier, tell us about what subject or topics you'd like to hear discussed on the program. As you can see, we come from various backgrounds. We don't always agree here, and that's a good thing. That's why this program exists. We can come here and freely express our opinions, our points of view. We're glad that you've been with us today. We look forward to you coming back again next time. But for now, as always, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And before we go, I'd like to say again a special thanks to Rabbi for being with us today. This is the first time on this program. You did a great job. Hope to see you again real soon. But for now, friends, until next time and at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.